the masses. Man, you now tuned into purpose and practice. Yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned into purpose and practice. Yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, he got it mastered. Franco.
Peace to the purpose community. We are back after a week off. I had a special opportunity last week to present actually to a group of superintendents at Monmouth County Superintendent. Actually, not, let me X that. It was Monmouth University. I had a chance to present to the Superintendent's Academy, which hosts superintendents from Monmouth County, Ocean County, and the surrounding counties. And I got a chance during that talk to talk about what I call, and Gloria Ladson-Billings, if you're familiar with her research, calls the educational debt. Rather than looking at the achievement gap in terms of Black and brown students and how they perform, in school, Gloria Ladson-Billings, Dr. Billings, flipped it and said we have a educational debt. So she took the onus off of the child and put it on the institutions. She put it on the school system, and she said, you know what, we got to do better. So we have a debt to these communities and to these young people and to these children. And, I think that that's very fitting for our guests this week because, there's a lot that doesn't go said or goes unsaid, rather, for school board members and for elected officials. I think one of the most important elections that we have, is the school board election. I really believe local politics at the crust of it is like one of the most important political stages, and especially when it comes to our schools. So I thought it would be a great show to bring on some board members who are repping Montgomery Township in the Montgomery Public School District to join us today and talk a little bit about their experiences prior to being board members, and then some of the joys and some of the challenges of being board members. I think that this will be a great show for any young folks who are looking to run for office, who are looking to be inspired by educators who they're not always called educators as board members, but I believe that I always refer to them as educators because the policy that they bring forth is very critical to what we do every day in schools. So I'm going to shut up and introduce our guest tonight. I'm going to go we got 4 on the panel tonight, so we got 4 on the screen. I'm going to go from my top right. We have Zelda, who is joining us. We have Patrick, who's joining us, and we have Cookie, who is joining us tonight. So let's welcome, the folks from Montgomery Township. Welcome. So let's start off. I like to just say, see how you're feeling. So Zelda, if you can just, we're going to check in with you first, just to see, how you're doing tonight.
I'm doing well. I'm exhausted, but I'm here and I'm happy to be alive. This is great. Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. Patrick, how you feeling, brother?
My brother, first of all, let me say thank you for having us here. It is a wonderful opportunity, and we certainly appreciate you. As Zelda, and to echo Zelda, tired. We had a school board meeting just last night. Didn't end until well after 11 o'clock.
Yes.
Discussing many issues. So it was funny because I actually had a work call today, and we were talking about the school board, and I had a lot of people at work that supported me. Even though most of my colleagues are out of state, but they did support me when I ran. When we ran as a team last year, so I jokingly said, "All of you who supported me, I'm going to unfriend you now because don't know what I got myself into." But hey, I love it.
Yeah, it's tough work,
Yes, sir.
And having never been a board member, but I've worked in central office in 2 districts. And so I got a close look at, how difficult the job is, and sometimes it can be thankless. So, but then sometimes it can be very rewarding. So, I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that tonight. But thank you, Patrick. And it's good to have you here tonight. Thank you. So we have Cookie. How you feeling, Cookie?
Hi. Echoing both my colleagues Zelda and Patrick, thank you for inviting us. I've been looking forward to this past couple months. I am also exhausted. like I work full time too, so I do all this extra volunteer work. It's tiring, but I enjoy it. I actually do. Like I don't know what I would do without all the volunteer stuff. Like I can't keep still. So this is good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's funny. I was talking to a friend today, and we were talking about that because I was like, man, I just need some time off. I need like 2 years, just off, right? And she was like, but what would you do? And I said, you know what? I would get bored quick, because like you said, especially when you're in the world of, serving children, serving school districts and communities, that is like that's some work that's powerful and that really keeps you busy. If you're doing it right, it keeps you busy, and even when you're not doing it, your mind is there. It's
Yep.
one of those. Yep, it's one of those jobs. So, in one of those roles and passions. So, here in the Purpose and Practice community, what we like to focus on is purpose and practice. So, we like to think about and hear stories about and narratives about the purpose that folks have that drive them in their passion. So in doing that, and tonight, what I'm thinking a great way to start off the show is by giving us a little background about what inspired you to be purposeful, to even run for like a board of education. What was it? Was it a particular incident? Sometimes there's an incident. Sometimes it's just a calling, or sometimes it's something that we always wanted to do. So I would love to hear, some of those motivators for you that pushed you into the forum.
All right. I'll go first. So thank you for that question. It's excellent, actually. And we were asked that question often during our candidacy. So for me, I felt like it was time for a change. And I wanted to be a part of that change. So historically, my family and I moved to Montgomery Township 13 about 13 or 14 years ago. And we were looking for a family-oriented community with a top public school district because we believe in the power of public schools. We discovered shortly after that Montgomery had, very gifted teachers, caring administrators. And through our experience, especially with our two older children who went through the district, we found that they were critical in helping to prepare our children to be successful, both in college and in life. And my family, we give a lot of credit, especially to the upper middle school and the high school for their standards of excellence, right? So overall, our experience was positive, but it was also painful. And it was the painful experiences that inspired me to run for the board. The racial discrimination that my children faced in the school system, it was hurtful beyond what I'm able to even express to you tonight. And it was awkward. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable to learn that this community where we chose to move to was not immune, right, to racial divisiveness that's plaguing our nation, right, the world.
Thanks.
So I felt like it couldn't be avoided. And I have a younger son who's still in the district. And I felt that I could make a difference on making their educational experience a little bit better, not only for him, but his classmates. And I believe in the tools and the resources that are available. And more importantly, when being introspective and examining my own skill set, that, wow, this school board candidacy is less about filling a board seat and just more about like this qualified parent who's just eager to be a part of a team, bringing a new perspective, bringing new ideas, right? And bringing a new voice. So it culminated, I was processing these thoughts for about a year prior to June of 2020. And as a result of an outcome rather, of the murder of George Floyd, there were a group of students, recent Montgomery High School graduates, that galvanized and petitioned the local school board at the time to have a special meeting, right? So that special meeting was conducted. Cookie may be able to provide some more insight as to how exactly that occurred. And it was listening to those young people's voice that sealed the deal for me. Like, I'm running, I'm willing to face laws, right? I'm willing to face my anxiety, right, about public speaking. It was worth it to me, and those young kids inspired me.
Wow. Wow, that, that's powerful. We got some folks who are joining in, and we like to think of our show as as interactive as we can get. But one of the things that you mentioned, Zelda, that sticks out to me is the voice of young folks during the last, listen, let me rephrase that, okay? I always feel young folks have had voice, but I think we listened more carefully over the last year, especially after the murder of George Floyd, especially when it came to them speaking their truth to power. And I met with so many alumni groups, student alumni groups from different schools districts, and they were asking, how do we petition the board to get the things that we need in school, to get the courses added? Because they were saying, I didn't get introduced to so much of our history until I got to college, until I got to a university. How do we begin that process? And young folks really took the stand and got so much accomplished in a very short amount of time when it comes to, public schools and school districts. So I'm happy that you spoke to that, because I think that was very critical. And there's so many more things we're going to build on, because even that, it being driven from being a parent first, like I think that you want the best for your children naturally. And if you don't see that happening, you're like, okay, then it's up to me to do something. And what am I going to do? So thank you for sharing that. Definitely some nuggets and some jewels that we'll revisit as we go on. I wanted to pick up with Cookie next. I'm interested in here because Zelda mentioned, you may be able to speak to some of the stories that those young folks taught, but if you can, great. But I also want to hear about some of the things that drove you to running for the school board.
So I've always been political. Even when I was living in the Philippines, I immigrated here when I was 27, so about 20 some years ago. And I've always been aware of politics. I grew up in that kind of environment. So moving here, I wasn't too aware, being an immigrant, like I said. However, 2016 changed me after the election of, the former president, who. That just galvanized me. I didn't want to be watching the news and yelling at my TV. I wanted to do something. So I became very active in the local Democratic Party here in town. That's how I started. I, organized for knocking on doors for candidates. I went on rallies to DC. I did all these things. And then same events from last year when George Floyd died, I had a friend who sent me a text. I remember this distinctly. It was a Tuesday evening. She sent me a text and she said, we need to organize a peaceful protest here in Montgomery. and I think you can be the one to organize it. I'm like, I've never done anything this big before. Let's just do it. So I called on a friend of mine who had a daughter who graduated from Montgomery, who knew other graduates. It turned out there were 10 of us, 5 women in their 40s and 5 former graduates of Montgomery in their freshman, sophomore year of college. And Chili, Zelda's daughter, became part of this organization too. So these 10 women organized in 5 days a protest rally here in one of our local parks. And we had about over 450 people show up. And these young women, I was in the background. Once I had them going, they were just so inspired and wanted to do more and lift up the voices of the Black community here in Montgomery. And that was the theme of our peaceful protest. We wanted our friends and neighbors to be front and center that day. And, these young women organized it, got the speakers, and eventually they established themselves as a local roots group, and they called themselves Monty for Justice. And they're mostly Montgomery young adults and high schoolers. And then after the protest, then there was that public forum with the BOE. These young women said, you know what? We want to do more. We just don't want to stop at the protest. Let's engage the school district. And I helped them reach out to one of the assistant superintendents. That was our first conversation. And then it just ballooned. And the wonderful thing about the district was they heard the kids. They heard the kids. They wanted to do right by the kids. And they engaged with these young adults. These young adults put together a document that had what their wish list, basically, of what the district needed to do to change. They provided resources, books, movies. Like, these are the things that you need to include in our curriculum. These are the things that we want the school district to change. They were so engaged. I am still so proud of them. They're still active. And at that point, this was like June, July of last year, I said, I want us to do this. Like, I was so inspired by these young women. I wanted to be part of the district and ensure that we have young students who will always be active, who will always be thinking about community, who will always be thinking about what I can do to better, my community, myself, my neighbors. That's why I decided to run for, Board of Ed.
These stories, I'm like, first of all, I should never be, but I'm always blown away by the spirit of our young folk. Like, these young people, man, I think back to when I was growing up, and I was, I think, a sophomore in high school, and that was the year Rodney King was beaten by the police, the LAPD. And I remember we had a walkout, and we were afraid. Some of us were afraid to leave because we thought that we were going to be suspended from school. And there was a senior at the time, Niles was his name, and he organized the entire walkout. And we walked out of our high school, Long Branch High School. And I'll never forget that day, because that was like one of the first days that I remember not even realizing, but standing up for something that we felt was unjust. In the power of that, so many of us walked out that they couldn't suspend anyone, because they would have ended up suspending half of the school, and it started to speak to the power and the voice, that we had and young people had. Cookie, I have to ask you, when you were asked to lead, and when you were asked, like, hey, was there ever a time where you said, not me? Like, because I think that sometimes we're called. So you did.
I did it. I don't know why. I just love doing this type of thing. I organized the bus from Montgomery to go to the Women's March back in, when was that, 2017?
Yes.
I just like things like this. I feel it's a calling for me. I think it's how I was brought up. I've had time to reflect on this, and if my father's listening, he'll probably be in tears. But I think it's his influence. My father and my grandfather, they were both in the military back in the Philippines. But I don't know if maybe some are familiar with our history. We had martial law, but I grew up in that environment. I heard things, and it just kind of affected me. And I always wanted to be politically active. I didn't know what that looked like. I wasn't as politically active back home, but here I just felt like I had the opportunity and I had the resources to do that for myself and for my neighbors. Like I didn't, when my friend called me, it just took 5 minutes for her to convince me to do it. And like right away, I called one friend. Next day, I called the municipal building, talked to the township clerk, like, we got to do this because I don't want it. I want Montgomery to see that, people like us are not alone in this community. We all feel what our, brothers and sisters are enduring, are feeling. And I want them to know that they have us here, that they're not alone.
Without a doubt.
So that was important to me.
Without a doubt. And it creates that counter narrative, because a lot of times there's a dominant narrative, and you kind of talk to that. And even the students, what they came out to protest and try to dismantle was a dominant narrative, and they felt that there need to be more perspectives at the table. So you all created this counter narrative. That's what you begin to do, and to show that there's another narrative out there. There's another story out there. And here at the Purpose and Practice podcast, we're all about narratives. So with that said, thank you, Cookie, for sharing that great story. We're interested in hearing it from Patrick. So if you could tell us, some of the things that inspired you to run.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Dr. Rawls, isn't it apparent why I aligned myself with these two young ladies? I mean,
you can't lose, right?
Exactly.
Can't lose.
Exactly.
Can't lose.
So that should be apparent. That should just be apparent. So my story kind of mirrors both of them. We moved in 2017 from Franklin Township to Montgomery. And again, basically some of the same reasons that Zelda said, top rated school. Our oldest son went off to college at Morehouse and is a graduate now.
Okay. Nice, a Morehouse man.
He is a Morehouse man, and a working Morehouse man, which is even more.
That's even better.
That's even better, and he's out of the house, so it's even more important. So we have at the time, I guess he was. 4 years ago, he was. My younger son was at 11. So we moved to the district, and coming from Franklin Township, which is a majority African American town, coming into Montgomery, which is a minority African American town, he had his challenges. Trying to fit in. Trying to insert himself into groups of kids who have been, friends since, kindergarten. So we had a couple of issues. So one of my biggest pet peeves was the way the harassment, intimidation, and bullying process worked. There were a lot of things that I did not agree with. He got caught up in some things, and it just got to the point where I needed to be on the inside to make some changes.
Yes.
Then along came, the George Floyd murder last year, the programs that Cookie and Zelda alluded to. I spoke on a couple of panels, and and Dr. Rawls, I wish you could, and I think the video is still available, but I would implore you to watch that video of the two sessions, because it's heartbreaking to hear what these minority kids faced for years. And Zelda's own children, faced the name calling, the racial epithets, the stuff on the walls, it was heartbreaking. And some of these students, especially young ladies, were in tears telling their stories. And I knew at that point, I said, I have to do something. And the three of us were lucky to be associated with the former mayor, Sadaf Jaffer, the first Muslim mayor in this entire state, female Muslim mayor in the state. The three of us were aligned with her. She actually brought us together. We talked, and I think we gelled from day one. I consider these two ladies my sisters. Cookie's, the political one. She got the political background. Zelda has a phenomenal, educator. I come from a law enforcement background, so the three of us just gelled, I think, from day one. And the three of us knew that we had to make some changes in this town, and that's what our goal is. That's what we're here to do.
Wow, that was very, very well said, man. And you said a word, align, and that alignment piece is so critical. And it sounds like you all had some help in your alignment. But even before that, what I loved in one of the common threads throughout the stories was it was like you were seeking more, right? You talked about more and wanting more, and that being a big motivator for you. And even in the case, Zelda and Patrick, you talked about seeking out a school that provided the best possible opportunity for your family. And you talked about Cookie being an immigrant, and your experiences in your own country and what those experiences were like with martial law and how that drove you. One of the things that I think happens a lot of times with educators is that, I always talk to teachers about this. When they interview, I hear one story of who they are, and I fall in love with that. And then sometimes they walk into the school and they sort of shed that story and they sort of blend in to try to become whatever the school is, whatever the culture of the staff is. And sometimes I would go to them and I would say, what happened to that person that I interviewed? What happened? Because I think sometimes we lose fire. Sometimes we conform to groupthink. And we follow the critical mass, and we abandon sometimes those things that make us who we are and that drove us to the point of being, inspired us. So I want to throw that question out there in terms of how do you keep that fire kindled? Like, you've gotten into a board seat. How is it that you stay inspired and stay motivated and not relax and kind of think, well, I made it to this point, so I'm just going to kind of lay low, especially now for board members. It's really difficult for you now. Is it, really? So I'm interested in hearing and like kind of what are some of the things that keep you going and keep you inspired?
I'll start. I think you're right, though. I think human nature human nature sometimes tends to dictate that we want to be liked. So in order to be liked, we want to fit in. But I tell you right now, being a board member in 2021, there are just a host of issues that come in daily that keep you on your toes. There's really no time to sit back and get settled and get comfortable, which is a challenge in itself because we're, the three of us are new to the school board community. We're all, just completing, about to wrap up our first year, and there's still a lot to know. And I think, I think I can speak for the three of us. We don't know what we don't know, because there's a lot of information to process on a daily basis. Yes. And as Cookie said before too, we all work full time. We had that job from 9 to 5, 8 to 4. But that school board stuff is still in your mind because there's something that happened the day before or a meeting you're going to have to go to at 6:30 that same evening. You're still thinking about that stuff. Yes. So I think a passion and a love for what we do. And actually, it's funny. I actually put a Facebook post up last night when I got home. I said, just getting out of a school board meeting, but remembering it's for the kids. Yes. And if you just keep that in the back of your mind, no matter how, people are at meetings yelling at you, not cursing, but yelling, raise their tempers, give me the side eye. Back of my mind, it's for the children. It's for the children. It's for the children, and that helps me and keeps me motivated and inspired. Thank you for sharing, and that's what I'm always telling myself when I'm driving home. It's for the kids. It's for the kids, and and that's one of the challenges for me is that I'm not in the school, so I'm located central office. I'm centrally located, and I always have to find my way to schools because that is the constant reminder of why it is that we're doing what we're doing. Anyone else want to hop on that in terms of what keeps those fires going and those passions going?
Yeah, well, that's great. for me, it's like quotes, right? Quotes like I just used last night, speaking of our board meeting at executive session, there was an important issue that we needed to discuss around perspective and intonation and collaboration. And I cited, Walt Whitman, who encourages us, right, to be curious, right, not judgmental. And what keeps me motivated is I think about Nelson Mandela when he famously said, the oppressor and the oppressed must both be liberated. I'm going to say that one more time. The oppressor and the oppressed must both be liberated, right? So when the former mayor of Montgomery, individually, we didn't know each other. And there was a fourth member of our slate. And we met at her house. I was invited. She knew each of us individually, but we did not know each other. And sometime in either late July or August, when that petition is due to the local municipality, we met at the Mayor Jaffer's and on the deck of her backyard, and we shared numbers and we began to communicate. And I think being inspired by others keeps me motivated. And more importantly, we Plainfield Public Schools, the district where I work, hired a new superintendent 2 years ago. And she shared with all the staffing her inspiration. And one of them is a renowned educator, Dr. Rita Pearson. And Dr. Rita Pearson tells us that every single student deserves a champion.
That's right.
And that was our campaign. I talked to the superintendent. I let her know, I'm interested in running, for the board in my town. And I think I'm going to adopt that as our campaign slogan. And it was champions for students. So being continually, inspired by those students at that special meeting, hearing their, not only what their academic experience, right, how it has prepared them in life to respect and honor what activism is and what that looks like, to employ being empathetic and how that feels and what that looks like, to continue to motivate what we do and caring for other people that are not like us, that don't look like us or speak the same language as you do. That is what keeps me motivated. And speaking of being a central office administrator, Fats, you know that I am one too. But what is unique, and I had a conversation at my summative with my boss back in June. We both were like, wow, so many projects I still work on so that I can remain connected to children because respecting that role that we have in their development process, particularly in a community like mine, where I humbly, accept responsibility for helping to raise these kids.
I love that.
Inspired.
I love that connection to students is so important. And shout out to you. You are the first person on the show to refer to me by my nickname given to me by my Aunt Lisa, who, rest in peace, I love her to death. If any of my colleagues in my district are listening and you heard Zelda refer to me as Fats,
I did.
You heard it. You heard it correctly. That is my affectionate name that was given to me at birth because I was such a big baby.
Wow.
And my aunt, when I came home, she said, "Oh my God, he's so fat," and it just stuck. And my grandma started calling me, and it never ever stopped. So shout out to you. That's a first, Zelda. Shout out to you. You got Fats on there. So, but again, it went back, to children. It went back to students in staying connected. I loved how you said staying connected. And I want to hear from Cookie, but then after that, I want to get into a little deeper and hear some responses from you all about something you said, Zelda, that I noted. But before we do that, Cookie, if you don't mind just sharing some of those things that are inspiring you that keep you going.
I've always thought that if you wanted, I know it's probably cliche, but I really believe it. If you want to make change, you start local. And for me, local means in the schools.
Yes.
They're still young minds, and they're learning right now. They're experiencing things differently, but that's where you can influence them or inspire them to really think about community outside themselves. Unfortunately, I think for most adults, we're kind of baked already, unless you're willing to learn. I constantly want to educate myself. I don't stop. I read all the time. And that's just something that I enjoy too. But that's for me. Like, I don't want to go out there and not know anything and not be respectful of other people. I want to learn. And young kids, young students are at this stage where we can absorb everything. And if we can help them, direct them, see all these, options and opportunities for them to make the right choices, this is where we can affect change in, locally in the schools. And I think too, one of the things that keeps me going is having partners like Zelda and Patrick. I don't know what I would do, with all the things that we've been going through. This 8 months feels like 8 years, seriously. But we are constantly in touch. We text each other all the time. We vent. We share good things. We vent. But you need people who support you. Of course, I'm sure our family support us. I better say that, or else my husband will be
Shout out to the
yes.
My wife supports me too.
Our spouses, our families, they support us, but we need to be supportive of each other, because when we're in those closed doors, in those meetings, we're the only ones, like the three of us. It helps that we were asleep to begin with, but it helps that we're also friends. I think that's important.
Yeah, that allyship is really important, and that keeps coming up. All of you have said it. You use terms like alignment and being aligned, and I think that you all do make a really good. I can just tell that you make a really good team. Shout out to my big sister Tracy, who just acknowledged the fats as well. So it's becoming a theme tonight.
The tea has been spilled.
Yes, they spilled it. They spilled it.
So growing up, believe it or not, growing up, I was very shy. I was a shy student, withdrawn, what they would consider then the gifted and talented programs then, right? Straight A student, model student, didn't get into any trouble or anything. It wasn't until high school when I started to evolve and advocating for myself, simply of getting frustrated, right? Getting frustrated, being overlooked or taken advantage of or not seen or heard. So as the years have gone by, relationship building, it has become a value for me. And I think that's one of the characteristics that connects Cookie and myself and Patrick, particularly, and the community, right? The various stakeholder groups within the Montgomery community that I would not have ever met or known about had it not been my choice to run for the board. They inspire us, right? Not just me, they inspire us and keep us going, right? Because we recognize and value that really important role that we're representative of those voices within the Montgomery community as local board members.
I think you brought me right back, Z. So I'm gonna use your extra name now. Since you're gonna use fast, I'm using Z. So you bring me back though, Zelda, to what you said. You said a few things. One of the things that you said earlier that really resonated with me is the link. And a lot of philosophers, a lot of great leaders have spoken about the link and the connectedness of the oppressed and the oppressor, right? And Dr. Martin Luther King spoke on it. Malcolm X spoke on it. Paulo Freire, who's one of the greatest educators, spoke on it in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And they also spoke about the danger of the oppressed, when being freed and becoming free and liberated, becoming even a worse form of the oppressor. And I always thought that was interesting, because when I was growing up, we were, I would say, critical of establishment. We were critical of systems, and we didn't want to join systems. But we had like this feeling of things needed to change, but at the same time, we didn't want to connect ourselves to system. Were there ever times, and you could speak even coming up as a younger person, were there ever times where, you felt like you didn't want to connect with system, and you thought that maybe that was a form of selling out rather than a form of helping, like, that was a form of joining the oppressor as opposed to, creating liberation from without? That's a struggle for a lot of Black and brown folks, especially, within the career and professions. So I like to ask that question, because I don't know if it resonates with you all, if you have any experiences with that.
Patrick, you go first.
Thank you, Zelda. Very good question. Very, very, very good question.
Yeah.
Again, I think I'll go back onto human nature, and sometimes not wanting to join, either because we don't want to rock the boat or be seen as anti-establishment type folks. My personal, experience, I was never a political activist advocate person growing up. I mean, I'm 54 now, and it's probably just, awoken in me in the last 2 or 3 years, just because of some of the things that I've experienced and my children have experienced. So, growing up, high school, college, went to a HBCU, but I wasn't and what you would call an activist, out there leading the charge and doing protests. Went to a couple of things, but I wasn't that guy. But I think, just some of the things that have happened in our society over the last couple of years, it's to the point where how can you not be?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
a member of Omega Psi Phi. We're very active in the community. I just joined a chapter in Plainfield. So Zelda, you'll probably see me a lot more in Plainfield. That chapter is very active, very political, and I will see myself being out there more and more, doing things for the community and just for society as a whole.
That, shout out, first of all, you said you went to a HBCU, so I'm gonna let you off the hook because you didn't say which school. And
Hampton
I know
University.
Okay, because
University.
You know how that goes, and I don't want anybody in trouble when you get off this call. Like, bro, you ain't shout out Hampton.
That's right.
H, bro.
Hampton University, class 89, Genesis 2. So I have to put all that in there.
All right. So yeah, I had listen. I saved you. You
did. I appreciate it.
So,
you did.
But and then you talked about Omega 13, and a huge shout out to Omega 13. I'm not frat, but one of my greatest mentors, Dr. Michael Rush, Omega guy, who's doing great things out in Ocean County for students, young people, still doing it. He's been around for a while doing it, and still doing it, having a mentorship groups, Omega 13. Shout out to Omega 13. That is the group that I actually did my dissertation with in terms of a community-based mentorship program. So I'm definitely on board with the work of the Omega brothers out there doing great work. But thank you for for sharing that, because and I don't know if anyone else wants to hop on that, but I think that is this constant struggle. But you said something that really resonated with me, Patrick, is you said, like, I figured, like, how am I going to change anything from the outside? Like, the only way, and it was impacting your children, but the only way is for me to get involved, and that sometimes is what drives us, even if we have to do things that we're not always, used to. Anyone else want to hop on that in terms of navigating, that system world and, maybe your own, personal values and getting into system work?
changing within the system is hard. It's very hard. I think one of the things with diversity, equity, inclusion right now, which is kind of the buzz thing for a lot of corporations, we're doing it. We've been doing it where I work for years, and it's baby steps, a lot of baby steps, because the establishment, if you will, has been entrenched for so long. We push back, and every time we're told, not a lot of people will like it. And in my head, I'm thinking, who's a lot of people? The not brown and black people? They're the ones who are pushing back. Like, if we're sincere about making change, we gotta be open and vulnerable and accept that we have failings, but try to reconcile that and move on. That's in the office setting. And when I was in party politics, that was one of the things that really depressed me. Working in party politics, the system is so entrenched, it's so hard to make change. Everybody, I feel like I'm a progressive individual, and to try and make changes like that, it's can't be overnight. Again, it's baby steps, and you have to be patient when you're doing the work, because it's for the long haul. You want to set your goals on how do I affect change now with little things, but there's a long game, and you have to sit and wait for that long game to happen. It's not overnight.
The long game, and that is a part that is easier said than it is done.
Done, absolutely. You get frustrated. Like,
yes.
You want to quit. It's hard.
Yes.
Change
And then realize, go ahead. I'm sorry, Patrick.
I was going to say change does not come overnight.
Yes.
It does not come overnight. Change is the process.
No, I think it's about personality too. That provocative question you put out there, Fats. I'm sitting here, I'm still thinking and I'm processing, like, okay, so I think it's just it's an internal struggle for me. Like, when I juxtapose my personality, when I think about systems and how they operate, and I don't believe there to be an either or, right? I believe it to be like a both and. So it's about taking risks. And I've learned that, at a young point in my life. And because I'm a risk taker, and because I don't necessarily believe in allowing the system to dictate how I think, how I move and operate in the various parts of my life, right? So when we're thinking about this Board of Education, I think my non-conformist approach to life, seriously, like, and I'm not unreasonable. I'm very reasonable and rational, and I process information over time. I'm fair and loving. I'm not afraid to use the word love. I love you and Tiffany and your children. I love Cookie and Patrick and their families.
Love you too.
I love the work I do.
Too.
Love being an educator. I love my students and the families and the community, where I work. But being a nonconformist helps me as I navigate through the system. And while, and there's a difference between being a nonconformist and being, and just breaking rules. My role is to challenge them, right? Because we can revise and modify them. So why not? And why not when it's most appropriate, when children and their families benefit?
They're counting on it.
Yeah.
Yes, they're counting on it.
Right. And the most beautiful part of what we do, with the challenges that come with being a board member, is just, I remind myself constantly, and even after last night's board meeting, I reminded myself, the most beautiful moments in our life, we achieve them through struggle, right? And you don't connect the dots when you're in the experience. Steve Jobs reminded us when he delivered that Stanford University commencement speech, you connect the dots looking backward, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
being a visionary and thinking about the impact of our work that we're doing now and looking back, that is what keeps me connected and grounded to the work when I think about the system, right?
And let me just piggyback on that. The
Go
three
ahead.
of us, we're not the typical board member. So as it is, we've shaken things up a little bit because the three of us have fun, and it shows. Individually, I think we've been reached out by other community members who tell us it's like a fresh of breath air.
Yes,
They see how much we enjoy the work, that we feed off each other. We're happy. We're not sullen sitting there. Exactly. We're enjoying the work and having fun and still doing the work.
Right. And it's not that typical board of ed that you see on TV behind microphones, suited up with, and dresses on. The three of us, as you can tell from this broadcast, are very approachable. And listen, we are human beings. We are parents. We are approachable. We have fun, but we do the important work. But we make it relatable, and we enjoy what we do, and it makes it that much easier.
And I think that those are things that folks need to hear, and that's why I'm glad you got a chance to share it with our community. And I'm going to build on that a little bit, and I'm going to now ask you. Zelda talked about connecting the dots. Going back, I would really love to hear about what kind of students you all were, because we know we've been talking a lot about students and doing the work to support student growth. I would be interested to hear. Listen, if you talk to my high school teachers, a lot of them wouldn't say that you'd be sitting here calling me Dr. Ross right now. But I think there's even value in that because it talks about evolution and growth and the potential, human potential. But can we hear at least about high school, what kind of high school student you were, and just share a little bit, for the folks out there.
Yeah, I'll go first. High school. So I actually not from New Jersey. I actually grew up in Ohio, Cincinnati. Went to a college prep school, which actually is the #1 school in Ohio right now. And but I was not. I was an average student. I was the fifth of 5 children. Most siblings are older, and my parents were older. So by the time I was going through high school, I think everyone was out of the house except for maybe my brother. So my parents both worked. I think my father worked second shift, so he wasn't home during the day, didn't home until at night. So I really didn't have the stereotypical, I guess, helicopter parents. How are your grades? What are your grades? And thank God that Genesis was not around back then, and they can check my grades.
They can check.
Thank you. Yes, I thank God for that. So I was I was a decent student. But then when I got to college, went to Hampton, and quick story about Hampton. So I knew nothing. When I say nothing about Hampton before I applied, knew nothing. I talked to a couple of people that graduated the year before, came back, talked to me about Hampton. I said, hey, you know what? I'll apply there. Got accepted. Was the only school that I applied to, got accepted. Wow. Had no idea how I was going to pay for it. Not a clue. Not a single clue how I was going to pay for it. Talked to my parents, and my father was, old school. He said, you know what? It is our responsibility to get you through college. So, and I'll get personal too. So based on that, I knew that I had to do well in college because I had 4 years. There was no being a 5th year, 6 year super senior, and your parents continue to pay for it. I knew I had 4 years to get through college. So I basically busted my butt through college. I had a 4.0 in my freshman year. They met a girl and that went downhill. But I did pretty well in college. And like I said, the personal story and my motivation is, again, I went through college and was there, and like I said, had no clue how I was going to pay for it. And my father owned a farm, part of a farm with his sister, my aunt. And if you went to a black school, you were very good friends with back in the day, they were called the bursar, the man or woman who took the money.
Yeah.
And, I was like, Mr. Johnson, the money's coming Friday. I promise. I promise. I promise. So I had that conversation many a time. But there was one time where, money was running short and my father sold one of his cows to pay my tuition.
Wow.
So that was a sacrifice that my parents were willing to make. So I knew I had to bust my butt to make sure I graduated in 4 years. And I did that, graduated with honors. So that's my story. That is my story.
Brother, that's a powerful story. And thank you for sharing, man, because you said so much. A lot of times I was having this discussion with a group not too long ago, because sometimes you talked about helicopter parents, right? And sometimes schools and teachers and administrators, if we don't see parents around, we sort of make an assumption that they're not involved or that they are not concerned about education. And you just brought that story full circle in terms of, they weren't helicopter parents, but education was important to them. And that's the question that I ask teachers, because sometimes it's back to school night. Some parents don't show up and they're like, it's always the parents that we need, or they don't care about education. And I'm saying, listen, check yourself, because I had the same type of parents. And what you just talked about, Patrick, is working all types of shifts. It's hard to be at back to school night. It's hard to check Genesis all the time, because you could be dealing with the day to day, but then your dad, your family sells a cow in order for you to remain, at Hampton and be able to get your degree. What did you study, brother?
I was actually a business major.
Okay.
So I graduated, worked at Prudential internal audit for 5 years, and then got into law enforcement after that.
Beautiful. And thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to step up? It's not too many people eager now. Now everybody kind of slouching in their seat, like, they want to talk about how we were as students. But to share a little bit of how, what you were like as a student, even if we just going back to high school.
I was also the same, an average student. I hated math. I swear to God, math was not my subject. Social sciences were my subject. History, English, those were the subjects I loved. And the funny thing is, after I graduated college, all the jobs I had were always either marketing, accounting, sales, like freaking numbers chased me. I hated it. But I was always interested in politics. I majored in political science back in the Philippines. It was always something that I enjoyed. I thought, so back home, in order to be in government, you had to be a lawyer. That's how I perceived it when I was young. So I wanted to be a lawyer. That's why I took political science. But life throws you a curveball, and that didn't happen for me. I did work for an individual who ran for president of the Philippines before I immigrated here. But I knew that was something that I was going to do eventually, be in some sort of activist role, politics, something like that. I knew that I wanted to be in public service, but I just didn't know what that looked like. And then I'm 46 years old, and this is the first time I've ever run for public office. And I'm thankful and grateful that my community, thought to vote for me. And here I am. But that was always something that I dabbled in, interested in, even when I was a young kid.
Beautiful. And I'm sure that they feel as lucky to have you there in Montgomery Township. So thank you for sharing that story, Cookie. And, Zelda, I don't know if, any of your students might be listening in. You may not want to share,
I will. So I'll fulfill my commitment here. That's important to me. So, shout out to Miss Pyle. I love you dearly. She's a school board member here for the Plainfield Board of Education.
Oh, excellent.
She inspires me. When you talk about activism, talk about Carmencita Pyle. Nonetheless, I have had a very interesting life. And I'm grateful for it, because it has prepared me for the numerous experiences that I have, unique experiences and gifts that I could share with my colleagues and my students. And I spent many years being embarrassed embarrassed and ashamed because there was a period of time where I'm the youngest of four and the only girl, where my three older brothers and I um, were placed in foster care. And then there was a time shortly after where we were separated. And if you can just imagine, being a little girl and separated, from your family, your biological family, and not knowing why, and not knowing how long, and living with strangers where there was difficulty to establish trust and connect because of the isolation, because of being told that I was other and that there was something wrong with me and wrong with my family. But going to school every day and putting one foot in front of another, and somehow being able to muster the strength to perform well. As I stated earlier, I was an outstanding student, academically. I struggled socially, but behaviorally, I was appropriate and mindful. So by the time I reached high school, and I'm very clumsy, so ball sports couldn't be my thing. So I discovered a love of running, and I ran cross country and track. And, I was recently, inducted into my high school Hall of Fame in
Oh,
South
all
Jersey,
right.
Buena Regional High
Salute.
School, for helping to raise me and be there for me. So I remember sitting in my homeroom class. We had period one, then homeroom for 10 minutes. I was sitting in my homeroom class and my junior year, and that was the first year of eligibility for consideration for the National Honor Society. And some of my classmates received the packet to complete, and the bell rang and I didn't get my packet. I went up to my homeroom teacher and I was like, excuse me, is there a packet with my name on it? They're like, where's my packet? He was like, I don't have the packet. And I said, well, can I have a pass, please, to guidance? Right? So I went to the guidance office. And when I was in high school, I don't remember seeing, dare I admit, a computer.
Yeah, it was a little different.
I can't even remember.
I had those typewriters, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, or this kind of word processing.
Yes.
I don't recall what my guidance counselor accessed or referenced, but it was as if he was prepared to tell me again, right, that I don't belong and I'm not good enough or smart enough. And that it was my first experience in advocacy, advocating for myself and using evidence in my argument, talking about my extensive community service in that school, my athletic accomplishments, my 3.9 GPA, because I probably got an A- in some class. So how I need you to look me in my eye, Mr. X, to tell me that I don't deserve this application. And he had no choice but to put all the papers together. Like there really was no application for Zelda, right? And he had to put everything together. And of course, I was accepted. I went through that whole experience. So I was very outgoing, very popular, fit in, grew up in this, in that particular foster home, was in a rural community, but I take those experiences, with me, and that is what I rely on when I connect with people, especially my students here in Plainfield, of the challenges and the difficulties, and letting them know that no, there's nothing wrong with you, right?
Yes.
And you are capable, and you are smart, right? And believing in yourself, even when nobody else believes in you, is the most, powerful skill, right, that you can have. And I like to tell my students that they're superheroes, right? And I was like, I'm a superhero, right? And one of my superpowers is believing in myself, right? And confidence. So I want you are a superhero, and that's one of your superpowers is confidence and believing in yourself, and working hard. So and I graduated in the top 10 in my high school class, and I chose to go to Rutgers because some of my other friends were, and just that's how my life began.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Zelda. You all you talked about superpowers. Hearing all of when you talk about superheroes, they all have origin stories, they call them. And when you hear those origin stories, they give you so much context in terms of what role they play in whatever comic it is, or whatever situation or challenge that they're in. When you hear those background stories, it serves like such contextual evidence of how they got to be who they are. And each of you shared origin stories tonight, that to me contextualize you as board members and as humans. Like you shared these human experience, because that's another thing that's happening right now. It's happening in the education period. There's a lot of dehumanization that is happening, whether it's teachers, whether it's board members, administrators, but especially those teachers who are on the front lines. There's a lot of that going on. And I think hearing your stories, as board members, it just gives so much of a human. I hate to say it, because we should all come in with that qualifier, but sometimes folks come in and they just want to, shout and explain how inadequate and incompetent you all are. And they forget that you are brothers, sisters, mothers, aunties, uncles, like they forget that, parents, humans, so thank you all for sharing, those wonderful stories. Thank you. So to wrap up, we don't let anybody leave the show without asking them if they were able to go back and give their high school selves some type of guidance or some type of advice. What advice would that be, and why? So we want to hear, if you did have an opportunity to give your high school self advice, what would it be and why? So who wants to have at it first?
Okay, so let's see. All right. So I would tell my high school self, when you go to college, hang out at the pre-med building.
Wow. Wow. Hold up.
Can we get Darren?
Yeah, exactly.
Hold up.
Oh, wait, we're recording.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm withdrawn. I'm kidding. Yeah, that's what I'll tell my high school self. I would tell, stay hungry. Stay hungry.
I like that. And that's like, it's simple, but at the same time, it's complex, and she is crazy, Roberta. She's crazy. But stay hungry, and I think that's something that we all need to do, is to stay hungry, stay inspired, stay motivated. Who else? We got anybody else want to hang out in pre-med buildings, or
Cookie
Wait,
went
wait,
to
wait.
found that, and I was like,
I would say to my high school self, just to be true to yourself, not to be consumed by what other people think, what's the right thing for you to do, because that's what's acceptable. It took me a long time to realize that, but just be yourself.
Yes.
Just be true to yourself.
Be true to yourself. You can't go wrong with that, because then if you're true to yourself, you're usually going to be comfortable in your own skin.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I always say with my own children, I'm like, man, if there's one thing that I can say that I want them to be is comfortable in their own skin, because I just think that takes care of so many other things and distractions and feelings of inadequacy and all of those things. So who's up next?
It
You
will
ready
be
for us,
me.
Patrick?
Yeah, it will be
You got
me.
some
And I have to give a
listen.
special shout out because if you know anything about Hampton, it didn't matter where you hung out. You were good.
You good.
You were good. You were absolutely good. I would say to my younger self, be an advocate for people. I think I didn't do that early in my life, and be an activist. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand. Be an activist and be an advocate for people.
Love it. And now you're doing it.
yeah.
Now now you're doing it. Phoenix Coaching and Performance put in the chat, local grassroots efforts are like looking at a tree. We see the tree above the ground, but it is the years of growth never seen underground that set the stage of what we see. He had put that up there earlier, but I was like, I gotta save that one until the end because it's a great way
Yeah.
to to close out our discussion tonight.
Can I just say,
Go ahead, go for it.
that's my husband.
Oh, that's your husband. Okay.
He has been dropping some knowledge in there.
Yeah, man. Listen,
Absolutely.
I had to save that one. He probably was like, why he didn't put that one up when I got off? He was probably gonna say to you, why didn't that Dr. Ross guy put that one up? I was saving it, Coach. That is because so much of what you all do is behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally behind closed doors. And working hard, because you start talking about making policy, that takes research, that takes understanding, whether it's law, whether it's code, it just takes, it's not just going in and having an opinion. If you want to be great at what it is that you do, and all of you sound like that's what you aspire to be, is to be great at what you do.
And just I want to say this too, just for for clarification. People see that one time a month that the board meets for the 2 or 3 hours, but they don't see the 4, 5, 6 committee meetings that you had prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so true.
Where all the deep down work took place in order to have that one monthly meeting.
So true.
Absolutely.
So true.
And even as before we go, even learning as recently as last night and being reminded rather, walking in that role as a board member, like making adjustments to how you operate, right? Because now we have to be mindful of to whom and how we communicate.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
There are statutes and standards and
Yeah.
policies that
Yes.
govern how we talk. And I'm
Yes.
like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is so restraining for people who like to network, to have relationships, to
Sure.
talk.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah.
It's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I think I shared it with Zelda and Cookie. I guess shortly after we got elected last year, I got an envelope from the Senate President Steve Sweeney. And I'm like, why is this? So, in some, the letter said, congratulations on your election. You are now a state elected official.
Yes.
And I was like, wow.
Yep.
Wow. So
Yes.
like Zelda said, it does impact what you do, what you say, how you say it. So
Yes.
It's
It's and that's why I said, and I think Cookie, you said it earlier, about if you want to create change, start local. But it ripples out, because when you talk those young folks that you all have worked with over the last, going back to the George Floyd murder, which seemed to be one of the motivators, so to speak, of all of you.
Yeah.
Those young folks are going to remember you. Those people who were at that board meeting, those children, those kids who spoke out and got you all, on fire to do this, they're always going to remember you. And then one day they are going to be those elders in the community, who are looking out for the younger folks in their community. So, a salute to you all. I really appreciate you taking this hour tonight with us, hour and 15 minutes. And I feel like what's crazy though, is like, we have 3 guests tonight, and I feel like we got a good piece of all of your stories, and we were able to do it in one show, and I'm just really excited about that. Like, to be able to get all of these great stories in one show. But all of you deserve your own show. You deserve one. You definitely, I think you got a show in you. So, I might be reaching back out to get a solo because I think that there's a lot more that you can share. But we really appreciate you. Those of you who came out in the chat, a lot of family out here tonight. I really, really appreciate the interaction in the chat. Some of you tried to join the show. We might be able to make that happen.
Thank you,
at another time. Yeah, Zelda sent the link.
Yes.
She just sent it to everybody.
I'm your show booker.
It's all good though. It's all good. But this is what our show's all about. So our community, sends thanks and love and blessings to you all. Continue to do the work that you're doing. Stay encouraged, man. Keep making it happen out there, because y'all definitely are. And maybe one day I'll get to visit your district and see the good things that you all are doing out there in Montgomery. So Montgomery School District in Montgomery Township, correct?
Right.
Somerset County.
Listen, they're very, very fortunate to have you all. Very fortunate to have you all. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We
Thank you for having us.
This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Come visit.
No doubt. I'm coming up there. I'm gonna come, or down there. I got to figure out if it was down there, up there.
You're about to talk for a high school principal.
Uh-oh. Listen. Don't get me in trouble with my district. They're gonna be like, hold on, bro. We could talk offline. But peace out to peace out to you all, and thank you to the community. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It's a encore banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp. Learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice.